Okay, Dean Legge Show for the week of Georgia's game with South Carolina. Let's get right into the questions. Don't want to take too long today. Got a lot going on this week. Georgia right now about a 5.5, 6-point favorite over South Carolina. UL Dog comes in straight away and says, will the running back rotation pretty much stay the same this week as the Clemson game? I think Nick Chubb might get a few more looks. I think Sony Michel may play a little bit more wide receiver than he has in the past. So that's something to take a look at. But yeah, I think Todd's going to get something like 20 to 25 carries. In other words, yes, I think he could get a few more. I think Nick Chubb will get some carries, and I think Keith Marshall will get some carries. Everybody's sort of given up on Keith. I think we need to realize that Keith still has some time to get back to where he was in 2012. So let's be a little bit patient about Keith. But yes, I do think that I think it will probably go Keith, Todd, Keith, maybe Nick in front of Sony. But anyway, they're all going to get snaps, and who's your 4 doesn't matter as much as who your 1 is. Coming Dog 22 asks, I'm assuming you've seen Malcolm Mitchell in practice. What does he look like to you? Is he noticeably still recovering? Yeah, I think Malcolm is not. This has been made pretty clear. Malcolm's not going to play. Justin Scott Wesley's not going to play. Jonathan Rump's not going to play. Justin, at the beginning of fall camp, looked pretty bad, and it's it's not been a year since he's come back from his ACL either, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Malcolm, I think we're going to see him probably against Tennessee, if I had to guess, something like that. But he'll be back this season for sure. The next question, Coming Dog 22 says, who that didn't make a huge impact against Clemson aside from Hudson Mason do you think has the best chance to make a splash in Columbia? Probably Sony Michel. If I had to guess, it'd probably be Sony, because Nick sort of stole the limelight that day against Clemson, and I think possibly that we haven't seen the best of Sony yet, whereas we've seen some very good from Nick. So I'd say Sony. And then the other thing, Ramik Wilson is another guy. I know he's a starter and everything, but I'd keep an eye on Ramik. If Ramik can neutralize or at least do his job against Mike Davis, it's going to be hard for South Carolina to win this game. UGA Dog Forever 08 asks, who do you see turning pro after this season? Malcolm Mitchell? Yes. Keith Marshall? No. Leonard Floyd? I'll say the same thing about Leonard and Jordan Jenkins, who are both on your list. It's going to depend how their season goes. I think Leonard is probably more of a freaky-deaky athlete than Jordan is, but they're both pretty good. The final guy on your list is John Theus. I think that John is a good question as well. John played pretty well against Vic Beasley. If that's the way he's going to play the entire season at left tackle, Georgia's going to be pretty good on the line, number one. Number two, John may want to think about leaving. A lot of people don't give this offensive line and John credit. I think it's time to seriously consider that. That offensive line in 2012 was eaten alive in Columbia. You got Quarles and Clowney and all these guys. They just ate up Canarius Gates and John the whole time. That's probably not going to happen this weekend. Hudson's probably going to get as much protection as he needs, and Georgia probably won't get down 21-0. Won't. Probably. We'll see. UGA Dog Forever 08 continues. Is it possible that Malcolm Mitchell or just Scott Wesley take a medical redshirt this season? Or take a medical redshirt. Well, Justin is out, has redshirted. Malcolm technically, I guess, has 2. Medical redshirts are a specific thing. The short answer is the answer to medical redshirting is usually no. Okay, so I'm going to stick with that here. It is possible that Malcolm could do it. Justin, I don't think, is going to have the legitimate cause to have that, because Justin still has multiple years left. So that's why it seems like a medical is very unlikely for Justin. Malcolm, possibly, but I don't. This is only Malcolm's 4th year in Athens, so the same thing would probably apply to him. Plus, I think, these guys want to go on to the NFL. They want to be in Georgia for 6 years. Swanee Dog 03 says, do you anticipate a similar offensive game plan in the Cott game to the one we used against Clemson, or do you see us passing more since the 2 opponents passed easily on them? That's the question. I mean, I think if you're Georgia, it's kind of like, if you're really good at cooking hamburgers, like you're the world's champion at hamburger cooking. Do you really need to learn how to cook chicken? So even, I don't know that you change things that much. But the thing about being the best hamburger cook in the world, which, in this scenario Georgia would be, they also can cook chicken pretty well, which would be throwing the ball. They're just not as good at that as they are at the hamburgers. So, I don't know. I expect them to throw a little bit. But listen, man, so I had these stats in front of me earlier. I've gotten a little behind here on Dean Legge's show in the week. South Carolina's given up a lot on the ground. They gave up some. I think actually I do have it here. Their numbers are just not what you need them to be. They gave up 6.3 yards per rush and 7 yards per pass against East Carolina. Now that's pretty bad. Okay, that's not going to 7 yards a pass is one thing. 6 yards a carry is just not going to work. Against A&M, they gave up 8.5 yards a pass, 4.3 per run. You can deal with the 4.3. Okay, I mean, like Georgia really shut Clemson down in the run game, and Clemson had like 2.6 yards a carry, something like that. A&M, I mean, South Carolina's not good on defense. That ain't getting tons better here, in the next however many days, 3 days. Swanee, Doggo 3 continues. Last year, the offensive line had trouble on the road. Do you have any reason to believe that unit will fare better? I think they'll be better because they're older, but I don't think. I mean, I think the one group that has the most trouble on the road is the offensive line because you can't hear. And it doesn't matter when you can't hear. As soon as you can't hear, it doesn't matter how much louder it gets after that. You just can't hear. I would take some issue with a lot of trouble. They scored 36 points on the road at Auburn. They scored 35 points on the road at Clemson. Those are two legitimate teams. They scored 41, but it was with overtime against Georgia Tech. I don't know how much road trouble they really had if you start talking about putting points up. At Vanderbilt, yes, that was not Georgia. So, I think the number one thing people need to remember, and people who play college football I talk to all the time, well, it's not like in basketball. So I played basketball in college. It's always loud. Doesn't matter, if you're at home or on the road, all these things. Basketball is less as important. The big thing, obviously, people watching this know, when you snap the ball in college football, the offense should have the advantage. On the road, if you're going nonverbal communications, that could mean everybody knows when they're going at the same time. And that's not what you want. I mean, there's a point, there's a reason why you have a snap count. There's a reason why, you can do those sorts of things. Georgia didn't try to draw anybody offside the week against Clemson. Maybe they'll try that with South Carolina. Maybe Hudson will go hard count. And the receivers will be told, just stay still, until we snap it. So that's the challenge of playing on the road. But the reality is South Carolina doesn't have the pass rushers that they once did. I mean, Bryson Allen Williams is going to be a very good player for them. He's a freshman starting for them right now, third game. He started the first game of the season. So that's a long way down from who I think will be a future Hall of Famer in the NFL, Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, that's a major difference. I don't know how to pronounce. I think this is Fleeves. The vibe seems to be a little more focused this year. What do you attribute that to? Well, they won their first game. That's a big thing. I think it was a time for a change at defensive coordinator. I think it was time for a change with some of the kids that were playing defense at Georgia. It was just time. I mean, Shaq Wiggins never really did anything wrong. He just wasn't serious enough. Trey Matthews obviously could not stay out of trouble. He wasn't hurting anyone, but he couldn't stay out of trouble, and that gets annoying. I mean, if you can't depend on someone to not scream at a professor, which you're in a college campus, that can't happen. If you can't depend on someone to go to class and behave themselves in class, I mean, the whole point of college football is not football. It's so you can go to college. At least that's what it should be. And I think that's what it is at Georgia. And it was time for a change. So I think the more focused thing is, Dominique Sanders is very interested at being at Georgia. He was one of the last guys to be there. He's playing in the secondary. Bowman is on his last run, and he's doing, better than he had. I think, offensively, you have a fair amount of confidence because you've got some serious running backs, and if Georgia can get past this game, they should have some serious receivers, some major firepower. So I don't know if they're more focused as much as the cast of characters has changed. Jeremy Pruitt seems to be much more direct and simplified in many ways defensively. I think that leads to confidence because the guys know what they're doing more. You saw at that Clemson game, Georgia there was no confusion. There was no, where do I line up? In a lot of ways, I felt like, with Todd was very smart in terms of football. But part of coaching is making certain that the people on the field totally understand everything you're doing and understanding the sort of limitations or the capabilities of the guys. Mike Bobo does a great job with that. I mean, he didn't ask Hudson Mason to do more than Hudson can do against Clemson at that given time. So I just think it was time for a change, and it needed to happen. I think if you're asking why everyone's more focused this year, I think they sort of feel like they have a real crack at some trophies this year. Rick Tite asks, I think I remember an inside linebacker named Johnny O'Neal in the same class as Reggie Carter and Tim Kimbrough. Is he playing this year? How does he look? He looked out of shape to me a little bit during fall camp, or at least sometime in the summer when I saw them running around. Everybody's not going to make it. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a 5-star, 3-star, whoever guy. Johnny is this will be his second year, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still got time. But yeah, I mean, Ryan Rankin was in that class as well. It's starting to see time when Johnny should be getting onto the field. And if he doesn't next year, then, maybe it didn't work out so great. I don't know. Rick Tite once more says, from a talent standpoint, how does this year's defense stack up to others in the Richt era, particularly in the early 2000s? Well, you don't have a David Pollock, and you don't have an Odell, and you don't have a Thomas Davis. But other than that, I mean, those guys all played on the field at the same time that 2004 season. Those guys didn't give up a lot of points either. I know Brian Van Gorder is a genius, etc., except when he was at places other than Georgia. But look, defensively, on the defensive, the front seven is probably as deep as it's been since that time. That they felt comfortable enough putting Kimbrough in front of Ramik at least for a little bit of time speaks to the depth. 2012 was a pretty damn good defense for Georgia, though. So I don't know. They're pretty talented, but they don't have. I mean, those guys I mentioned, Odell had drug issues, or he would have been a first-round guy as well. I mean, David and Thomas, who is still in the league, those guys were top 15 guys. I mean, I think if you're looking at this Georgia defense, Leonard could be a top 15 guy. But after that, I mean, Ramik probably won't be a top 15 guy. He may be a first-round guy. But Georgia, that 2004 defense, I don't think these guys are as good as that. And that 2004 defense also had Kedrick Golston, Greg Blue, DeMario, Tim Jennings. That's a lot of NFL guys after a while. We could look back at this group, sort of like the 2012, and say, boy, they were loaded. It looks like we're headed that way. I don't know how. I'd have to sit there and look at it for a while to know which group was better. But it's better. Brian Evans in playing safety. So is this in 2009 when they're getting lit up? Is Bellamy back from suspension this week? No. I think we'll see Fentag and Parrish. Do you think you'll see Fentag and Parrish some Saturday? I was a little surprised we didn't see Malcolm Parrish, but again, this guy's first runs at the SEC. I can't speak to Shaddle and if and when he will play, but he'll play. Look at this defense has plenty of people. This isn't like in the past where they were, stretching it. I think they're not unbelievable at certain spots, safety, but they're not bad either, and they've got a fair amount of guys. I watched the first half of Clemson. Everything went right in the second half. There's no really reason to discuss that. I thought in the first half Georgia actually played okay against Clemson. That's balls hit on them in man coverage. We'll see if Jeremy Pruitt sticks with the man and just sees if Dylan Thompson can beat it. If he can't, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving up a touchdown or two in the first half to see if you can do something. Because I think this offense has proven that it can score points. It's only a matter of time. So, no, but Davin Bellamy is out. This is the last time. And Malcolm Parrish, maybe they're more comfortable right now, maybe redshirting him. But I know he's a pretty good player. I'll say that. JC, I don't know what your name is. I can't remember. With Mike Bobo and Mark Rick both expecting to see improvement in down the field passing game this week, would they think about playing Bryce Ramsey if it doesn't, not necessarily this Saturday, but later in the season, even if we were still winning games? Yeah, I think Bryce is going to play this season. I don't think why would you not? I think he'll play. Balta will play. Obviously, Jacob Park will not play. Bryce is the 2. I'm reminded of 2004. Georgia got down 16-0 in Columbia. DJ Shockley, who was at that time a junior, not a redshirt freshman, was backing up David Green. David had thrown a pick 6. That's how South Carolina scored at least 7 or 6 points. I can't remember how they scored to some degree. But anyhow, Georgia looked like they were in real trouble in Columbia, and they were. Mark didn't put DJ in because he felt like, he felt like it was David's team. Well, this is Hudson's team. But I think Bryce could play this week. I don't think it's 100% one way or the other. I think this is probably, he's got a 30, 40, 20% chance of playing in the game just to, see what you got. There was no reason to play him against Clemson. I don't know if there's really going to be a reason to play him against South Carolina. He'll play against Troy unless the game is a lot more competitive than it should be. But Bryce now listen, when I say this, Bryce is a special quarterback. He's just young. And people need to remember that the kid is abnormally talented, and it is a matter of him understanding everything he's supposed to do. When that happens, he's special. Dixie Doggo 2 says, with the sheer size and talent of the South Carolina line, do you see guys like Mays, Johnson, and Atkins getting more playing time this week playing time this week counter to their offensive line size? Watching both games, I noticed a lack of pass rush or even on blitzes, and South Carolina's inability to cover the middle of the field. It seems this matchup plays the strength of our passing game, which is short passes over the middle. Thoughts? These are 2 different questions. I'm sorry. Do I think that Chris Mays, Toby Johnson, and John Atkins will play more? I'm sure they will. Look, South Carolina's line is supposed to be really good. They've scored points. They've not been great in the run game. They've been a little bit better than average. I think Mike Davis, if he goes out, Georgia's very comfortable. Otherwise, I don't know. But yeah, they'll rotate guys. It's not going to be that hot in Columbia. It's going to be a little bit odd in that sense. So, get ready for that. And so that might help the defensive lines in general. Yeah, Chris Mays and Toby Johnson and John Atkins, they're not going to get left out the whole season. Georgia has plenty of defensive linemen. They're going to rotate them like they did. They should be quite fresh in the second half. Georgia has a lead going in the half. You should be comfortable. Talking about South Carolina's lack of pass rush on blitzes and their inability to cover the middle of the field. They're not great on defense, as I've said before. They really do have issues. they have issues defensively. I mean, Bryce Allen Williams is going to be a good player over time. It's sort of like asking, it would be like asking Bryce Ramsey to come in last year and guide Georgia to the Eastern Conference Championship. That's what they're dealing with. They're young on their defensive line. I haven't looked at it lately, but they lost 3 years of guys. I mean, with Corals and Clowney and all these guys, and their linebackers were supposed to be studs, and East Carolina's running all over them. So their defense has some issues. Put it to you like that. Rick Tite asks one more time. Dean, can you give me one reason to think Georgia will break the spell in Columbia and win going away? That certainly has not been the trend, as we seem to play a sloppy game there every time. There's a lot of reasons why Georgia plays a sloppy game. Typically, it's because South Carolina gets up for this game in a tremendous way. It's the first road game of the season. And lately, they've been good. Okay, South Carolina's been pretty good. One reason to think Georgia will break the spell in Columbia and win going away is Todd Gurley is really good. And South Carolina just doesn't have an answer for that. Now, if Todd gets hurt, it becomes a much more difficult game for Georgia. But there's a reason why Georgia's a 6 or 5.5, 6-point favorite, whatever you want to call it. They're the better team. They should win the game. Win it going away, I don't know. But this is the largest they've been favored on the road against a ranked team in Mark Richt's time. I mean, Las Vegas says they should win this game something like 33-27. And it'll probably be like that. It'll probably be one of those things where, Georgia has to, grind it out at the end or stop a drive at the end. It's an SEC road game. They're not going to kill everybody. That's just not reality. Okay, last question, this time from Payne Hall. Predict the number of headset throws, cap resettings, play sheets slinging by Steve Spurrier on Saturday afternoon. If Mike Davis doesn't play, he's going to be upset with his play sheet. He's not going to like that. I think he knows they're not that great. I think this is a different, I think Spurrier understands that this is not a great South Carolina. This is not the guys they've had there lately. So I don't know how many times he's going to really get pissed off. And if Dylan Thompson kind of wets the bed a little bit, yes, he's going to throw, he's going to do what he does. But, I mean, I don't know if you watched these last two games at the half. He was just disgruntled when they were going in the half for A&M. When he was going in the half for East Carolina, he kind of was, he wasn't the same way, but he was saying, listen, we're just, And then the press conference this week, he said, we're young, we're this, we're that. So, I don't know, they're not as good. Maybe they come in and knock Georgia off. Maybe they punch them in the mouth and Georgia's not ready for it. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think Georgia's going to win. They'll cover the line. Might not be pretty. Doesn't have to be. First half of Clemson and Georgia wasn't pretty, but I thought Georgia played fine. So I think sometimes you can't fall in love with just blowing everybody else because it's not reality. I mean, that 2008 Florida team, which was quite good, they didn't thrash everybody. They thrashed everybody at the end of the season, not at the beginning. So it's one of those things where you need to win, and that's it. You don't need to score victory points. And the win against Clemson, to start the season with 2 wins over ranked teams would be pretty substantial. And there's still plenty of schedule left for Georgia. They've still got Missouri on the road. They've still got, I don't know what Tennessee will look like when they come in. They're still a name, though. They've got the Gators. They've got Auburn. And they've got, in theory, an SEC championship. Georgia doesn't need to worry about rankings. They don't need to worry about the committee. They need to worry about getting to Atlanta and winning that game. They do that, they'll be in the playoffs. There won't be anything to think about. Even probably with 2 losses, they won't need to think about it. So, all right, Dean Legge Show for the week of Georgia's game with South Carolina. Come in. Tune in next week for this edition and stick with Dogpost, DAWGPOST.com for all the action. There's another phone call. I got to get it. See you next week.